Félicien, affective selfishness, disillusionment after death, and the late awakening of moral responsibility, the testimony of the Spirit. Félicien, presented in the second part of Heaven and Hell, reveals a spiritual picture marked by affective selfishness, the illusion created around one's own feelings, and the moral shock that occurs when consciousness frees itself from the appearances of material life. It is an enlightening account of how intense emotions, when not accompanied by responsibility and respect for others, can generate deep suffering after passing. Félicien manifested with intellectual lucidity and a clear memory of his earthly life. In life, he believed he acted driven by legitimate feelings, especially in the emotional realm. However, after the death of the body, he realizes that many of his actions were guided more by personal satisfaction, emotional possession, and the pursuit of immediate gratification than by true love. This realization generates a profound disillusionment with himself. Modern depth psychology helps to understand this state. Unprocessed intense emotions tend to be confused with love when they are actually linked to dependency, attachment, and the need for validation. As consciousness matures, it begins to recognize the difference between authentic feeling and ego-centered emotion. This recognition, although necessary, can be painful. Spiritism clarifies that Félicien's suffering is not divine punishment, but rather a result of the awakening of expanded empathy. In the spiritual realm, he begins to clearly perceive the impact of his actions on others, especially when those actions have caused emotional pain, frustration, or imbalance. The consciousness, now more lucid, feels what it previously ignored or minimized. Modern science reinforces this understanding by showing that emotional maturity involves the ability to consider the other as a full subject rather than as an extension of one's own needs. Relationships based on emotional selfishness tend to generate suffering for both those who experience them and those who receive them. In the spiritual realm, where moral perception expands, these dynamics become even more evident. Another striking point in Félicien's testimony is the breakdown of the idealized self-image. He believed he had lived correctly, but upon awakening, he realized deep inconsistencies between what he felt, what he did, and what he caused. This rupture generates intense moral pain, yet it is necessary for the beginning of true spiritual learning. Spiritism teaches that this state is not permanent. As Félicien acknowledges his responsibilities, abandons justifications, and develops a sincere desire for restitution, a process of re-education of the conscience begins. Suffering does not exist to condemn, but to correct the inner direction and promote growth. This testimony offers a contemporary and profoundly human lesson. Not every intense feeling is true love. The love that builds is one that respects, frees, and considers the well-being of the other, even when it requires personal renunciation. When the feeling becomes possession, it strays from its moral purpose. Félicien teaches us that spiritual life does not evaluate speeches or declared intentions, but the real effects of our attitudes on the consciences we relate to. Loving requires emotional responsibility, empathy, and maturity. Reflecting on this account is an invitation to emotional vigilance in the present. Examining our motivations, learning to love without dominating, and developing true empathy are essential steps to avoid unnecessary future suffering. Consciousness grows when it transforms emotion into conscious love. If this testimony has helped you reflect on feelings, emotional responsibility, and spiritual growth, like, share, and leave your comment. Your participation helps this message reach more people.